Hey everybody, always Dizzy here, and I am back with my round 4 report from the 2024 Grand Pacific Open. Um, it's been a little bit of a delay between the round 3 and the round 4 video. I've just been really busy. Um, so as a recap, I had drawn my first game against a 1960 player. And then I drew the second game against a provisional player who had only one game previously. And then I lost round 3 against a young player who played very well, played literally a perfect game. And I overlooked a move in that game, so I lost. So I was going into round 4 with a score of one out of 3, and I was paired up against Taylor McLean, who is actually, I think he just moved to my city from a nearby city recently, but I've never seen him at the local chess clubs. I did see him at a local tournament before, but I didn't play in that tournament. I was just watching. Okay, so as I've been doing for this series, I'm hiding the CFC rating of my opponent until after the game. So you can kind of guess what the rating is if you like. So let's take a look here. Sorry, oh, by the way, it's 3:49 a.m. as I'm making this video. My sleeping schedule is all messed up right now, and I've just been busy, as I said. So, yeah, it's a weird hour to record the video. Okay, so the game started with c4. Now, not a very common opening at my level. Pretty rare, in fact. I responded with knight f6, and he played g3. So, not exactly a surprising move from white when it's in English. I mean, it's pretty rare for c4 players to transpose to like d4, c4. If they wanted that, they'll usually just start with d4. It's pretty rare, though, that I get these English/Catalan type positions at my level. So I really don't know them very well. I also dislike playing against them because I don't know them very well. But also, I don't love playing against d4 or c4 in general. Or knight f3. I really like playing against e4 to get my Sicilian in, and some specific d4 lines that I don't mind as well. Anyways, I have been starting to work, though, on my response to this type of system, this c4 g3 system. I don't know if this has a specific name for an opening, but I have been working on it a little bit. But again, it's so infrequent that I get these openings. So it's hard to get much practice in against them. I played e6, bishop g2, d5, played knight f3. And then here I made a somewhat uncommon move. It's actually the third main line in the opening in the Masters database, but it's even more rare at the amateur level, and that is d4. So, and it's also a move that normally I don't play. If I hadn't known this move, if I hadn't built it into my repertoire, I would never ever play d4. Like on a whim, because to me it's overextension. It's pushing the pawn a bit too far, and we're delaying castling, and that pawn could become a liability and require a lot of babysitting. So And I think, like, I don't know the Benoni at all, but I think I read somewhere that this kind of gives Benoni like structures for black. But um, the reason I play it without knowing anything about it is the computer quite likes it, and it has scored pretty well in the database as well. But yeah, the computer quite likes d4 here compared to other moves, and black gets a lot of space. Of course, black has to be careful again about not overextending, and there is some babysitting required, but black does get space, and I think it makes the position uncomfortable for white. Okay, so white castled. I played c5. Often in these positions, I found that knight c6 and c5, typically they transpose, but not always. Like, usually one move is like 20 centipawns better than the other, but c5 is a move. It might seem like we're kind of overstretching here, but the c5 pawn really helps to secure the d4 pawn. e3 was played, and I played knight c6. And my opponent played d3. So I remember when I was like looking at the opening more, trying to learn it, I read somewhere that if white decides to take e takes d4, that it's not good to recapture with the knight. I don't remember if what I read explained why, but I think the reason, and I'm reading my notes here, if you see my eyes dart off over here, is because it allows white to trade and open up the bishop and have a greater influence across the board. And I also think that it simply allows white to trade off a piece, and since black has more space here by a tiny bit, trades benefit white. It's not like a huge eval difference between knight takes, but it's notable for the opening. It's like a 50 centipon difference. So I was prepared to take with a pawn had my opponent taken on d4 here, but he didn't. He played d3, which is, I know that it's also a normal move in this position. And I played bishop d6. So far I was comfortable. I had looked at this opening recently, so I was pretty sure that I was playing according to my repertoire. But even so, I was still not super comfortable, like still inexperienced in the line. So I didn't have plans. I didn't have any real plan. I just knew some of the thematic moves. So my opponent took on d4. And again, same idea. I didn't want to take with the knight, so I took with a pawn, avoiding the knight trade. My opponent played a3, and I played a5, just preventing b4. And he played knight bd2. I castled. And then and then he played rook e1. And then here I spent 4 minutes on my reply. Because I didn't really have a plan. I'm new to this opening, and I just don't know the general ideas for black. So I had to kind of figure it out on the fly. The move I played was fine, but I still didn't have a plan of what I was going to do afterwards. And I just played rook e8. I figured the rook likely belongs on the e file, and potentially my bishop could go to f8 if it needs to later. And I was just kind of basically waiting to see what white did. My opponent played queen c2. And then I spent 10 minutes on my reply. Again, showing my inexperience in this opening. In addition to not having to not having a plan or knowing the thematic ideas here. I was unsure about exactly what to do, and I did start to see some ghosts here. So for example, e5, which was something that was on my mind, just protecting d4. I think I'm just looking at my lines here. I think, yeah, I was actually like afterwards when I looked at it with the engine, that black is fine here, but I was a little bit nervous about some of the lines here. For example, if e5 right away, c5, which is now supported by the queen, so it can now be played, and then sorry, and then if I retreat to c7, the knight coming into c4, so it clears the square, the c4 square for the knight. And again, the computer says that black is fine here, but I felt a little bit nervous about just letting this knight sit on c4, and I wasn't sure how I would recapture the c5 pawn, because if I go queen e7, maybe I could have just played queen e7 there. But queen e7, then there was maybe bishop g5, for example, right? And then I wasn't really sure about that. And if I stayed on this diagonal and went bishop f8, then after knight c4, again we're fine, but black has only two decent moves here because white is attacking e5 3 times, right? So the best two moves were e4, according to the engine, which I would have a very hard time playing that. It's a scary move to play. And then knight d7, and we are fine. But again, this feels awkward, like blocking in our bishop and just being unfamiliar with these lines. I didn't really like it. So I ended up playing h6, which was fine. It's just as good as e5, but you can kind of see, because in one of those lines, the bishop goes to g5, and I just wanted to kind of stop that. And again, just kind of play it safe. My opponent played rook b1. And still here, I was still apprehensive about the c5 knight c4 plan. And I spent another 10 minutes on my reply. The move I played was good, and I didn't recognize it at the time, but I was spending too long on these moves. So for the past 2 moves, I spent 20 minutes, and we're only on move 13. So again, I didn't really think about it at the time, but I was playing too slow here. So I played e5. He played c5, bishop f8, and then b4. And then I spent 6 minutes on my reply here. And I had actually calculated my plan. I mean, there's really only one move here for black, which is to take. Like, nothing else really makes sense. But the reason I spent a few minutes on this is because I was actually planning my response afterwards. So I took on b4. He recaptured. Played knight d5. And then after b5, which I had expected, I played knight cb4. So this is the best move. And then here my opponent thought for 15 minutes. That's a long think. Just a reminder that the time control in this tournament was 90 plus 30. And I was expecting queen c4. That made the most sense to me. But I was a bit tired in this game overall. I wasn't super sharp, and yeah, I was just mentally a little bit tired. And so during my opponent's long think, I was thinking a bit. I was at the board. I wasn't walking around. I was at the board, and I was thinking a bit how I'm going to respond to queen c4, but it wasn't a good think. Like, it was a little lazy of a think. I was kind of looking off a little bit. and I wasn't super focused. So I had a general idea of what I was going to do, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. Yeah, I didn't have a concrete specific reply lined up, but I think I was looking at if queen c4, bishop takes c5, and then after if queen takes c5, knight takes d3, and we have a fork. And I thought that would be good for me. However, instead of after bishop takes c5, instead of queen takes c5, reading my notes here, white can instead play knight takes e5, which I don't remember if I looked at during the game. And then the only good move for black here is bishop f8, just protecting the bishop because it is under attack. We can't protect it with a pawn. Why is this not good? Maybe there might be, possibly because of rook b4 might be an issue. Yeah, and then I'm not sure if this is the reason why, or even, yeah. And if we try to protect it, then I don't know, our rook here is unprotected. I don't know. Even I mean, it's 4 a.m. right now, so I'm too tired. But it's a little bit complicated. But my opponent didn't play queen c4, so I'm kind of getting sidetracked here. He played queen b3. Which is a bit of a mistake, if I remember. I don't have it marked as a mistake, but I'm pretty sure that was a mistake. But it's not so obvious why. This gets a little bit complicated. So here I played f6 because I was worried about, okay, so f6 is actually a blunder, but again, I don't think it's super obvious. So bishop takes c5 is kind of, it's on the table here. Sorry, my speech is failing. 4 a.m. It's not the best time to make a video, but obviously I was looking at bishop takes c5, but then I was scared about, or maybe not so scared, but this seemed a little bit complicated to me after knight takes e5. But bishop e6 would have been winning for black. And I just didn't, I think I just got a little bit, I was just a bit tired. And I think I was thinking too, like, why can't I just play f6 first and stop any of that complexity and then take on c5? Like, what's the rush? What is the rush? But the reason why we do want to take on c5 first and allow knight takes e5, playing bishop 6, is because if we take first, sorry, I mean, if I play f6 first, which is what I played in the game, this allows, amongst other moves, but bishop a3, when my what are these called? There's a name for it. Superfluous knights. When my superfluous knights start to become a bit of a liability here, and now if bishop takes c5, then well, this is actually what happens in the game. But yeah, it was more accurate to take here first. I think if bishop a3 now, well, I dare not put on the engine because it will crash. It'll crash chess base. But if bishop a3 here, I forget, there was something. I think it's just knight takes d3. No, that can't be right. Yeah, I think it's just knight takes d3. And this is good for black. I think that's why. No, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's why. Because if he takes the knight, then we can go rook takes a3. And the knight defends the bishop on c5. So it would have been better to take on c5 right away. But having played f6, and now bishop a3, there is a difference because I spent a tempo playing f6. And bishop a3, by the way, is the best move. And my opponent found it after a 14-minute think. And so over the last two moves, my opponent spent 29 minutes, which is significant. That's a third of the starting time. Wait, is that right? Yeah, it's a third of the starting time in two moves. So he really dug in deep here. And after bishop a3, he was down to 26 minutes. But meanwhile, not a whole lot was going on in my head. Even here, even as the position got pretty dynamic, I was just mentally tired, and I don't know. It might have been partly because I was inexperienced in the position. I'm not sure what it was, but I just wasn't really fully mentally invested in the game. I mean, it wasn't terrible. I mean, I was concentrating, but not as much as I could or should have been. And I was also, most of this time, I was just kind of hoping that my opponent continued to play very slow, as he had been for the past two moves. Okay, anyways, continuing on, I took on c5 here. But now, because I played f6, this allowed some moves such as what my opponent played. Knight takes d4. I think even slightly better, according to the engine, is bishop takes b4 immediately. But yeah, he took on d4. And I went rook takes a3. Not the best move, but it was okay. And he recaptured. And then I took on d3. So let me just do that again, because I might have did that a little bit too quick. But yeah, I sacked the exchange. And then I took on d3, because after he recaptures, then I can take his knight on d4. Now, was it here? Yeah, so after rook takes a3, queen takes a3, instead of taking on d3, better was actually bishop takes d4. And then after rook takes b4, knight takes b4, queen takes b4, white has the bishop pair, and I think black has the bishop pair, and I think white's pawns are a little worse than black's. So this would be a very comfortable position for black. I think in the game, after rook takes a3, I didn't really pay attention too much to the fact that I gave up the exchange. Like, I'm sacking the exchange here, and even though I get a pawn for it, I didn't fully appreciate that I did give up the exchange for a pawn. So yeah, it would have been better. I mean, and if I hadn't spent so much time earlier in the game, I'm pretty sure I would have just taken the knight, because it just makes sense. And he has to sack the exchange back here, because if he doesn't, well, I'm what, 2 pieces for a rook? Yeah, then I've got 2 minors for a rook and 2 active minors for a rook. So he has to sack it back. Okay, sorry. But getting back to the game. After knight takes d3, queen takes d3, bishop takes d4. He played knight b3. I went knight c3. Knight takes d4. Knight takes b1. And then here my opponent found a nice little Zwischenzug. Nothing hard to find, but it was a good try. This was a useful move to make, and he played queen b3 check instead of just taking the knight right away. And the reason this is nice, in my opinion, is because it gives black a couple chances to screw up. In the game, I played king h8, but notice if I had played king h7. So king h8 is the only non-losing move. If I had played king h7, then of course he takes with check and then just retreats his knight somewhere, and he's up a piece. And if I had played king f8, there's a couple ways to do this, but knight c2 exclam, and we're losing a piece, because after knight d7, trying to retreat it under protection of the queen, then there's a fork after queen b4 check. So yeah, queen, what was it here? Yeah, queen b3 was a very useful move. But yeah, I played king h8, and he went knight f3. So at this point in the game, white had 13 minutes and I had 25 minutes. I played knight d2. He captured and I recaptured, and he played rook d1. And then queen a5. And he played queen d5. Okay, so at this point, I was feeling pretty decent here. I had 22 minutes. My opponent had 12, so I had about twice as much time as my opponent, and I was a pawn up. So I was feeling pretty good and pretty safe. I mean, I wasn't feeling like I'm completely winning or maybe even winning, but I felt I had an advantage, and it's a pretty comfortable position. And again, the clock situation was really good for me. But then I messed up for the stupidest reason, and it's so aggravating. Like it's when you blunder, that's one thing, but the reason behind the blunder can really just be can really change how you look at it. I thought that my queen, ChessBase won't let me do this, unfortunately. Will it let me do this? Oh, it will let me do it. I thought my queen was lined up with his rook. I don't know why. Again, I told you I was kind of mentally tired in the game. Like physically I felt okay, but like just mentally I was tired. And I thought my queen was lined up with his rook. And so because of that, and because my vision betrayed me, I thought that bishop e6 here was fine, because if queen takes b7, then I just take his rook like that with check. And so it made sense to me to play bishop e6 because I'm developing the bishop and getting active, and then I can maybe play like b6. It made total sense to me. And so I played bishop e6, and he took on b7. And after he did that, I thought at first, like, whoa, I take the rook. But then, as you know, once I looked at it after more than a second, I saw that I had just screwed up here, and I was so angry at myself. Blundering for such a stupid reason like this is so aggravating, because it's not like I it's not like I miscalculated something or I missed a fork, as bad as that is, but just because, I don't even know how a queen moves, apparently. I don't know. It was just such a stupid reason. Now, what's surprising is that Stockfish 16.1 right now that I'm using thinks that this is only a small inaccuracy. But of course, that's the computer. Computer can defend super well. Practically speaking, to me, this is a blunder. So the computer doesn't really mind it. It's something like a 50 cent a pawn difference. But from a human point of view, I think this is a big blunder because I give him a passed B pawn, and it's not easy to defend. Okay. Wait, is that right? Yeah. Okay, so I played queen a4. Plays rook c1. And I played rook d8. So rook d8 is apparently a blunder, as this allows white to, it gives white time. So obviously my plan here is check and then bishop h3, right? I'll put that on board. So for example, if he pushes the pawn and we trade, then I could probably go either way, I think. No, this is better. Yeah, otherwise he would have bishop g2. Yeah, and then this should be. Yeah, this should I guess maybe not winning, but we are fine now. I think we're fine. Maybe it's still. No, we should be fine. Yeah, we should be fine. So that was my plan. My hope, my wish, my dream. Where was I here? But rook d8 is actually a blunder because it gives white time to create luft for the king by moving the h-pawn. So better than rook d8. The only, or maybe not the only move, but the best move, and a move that does hold a draw, is... It's actually a pretty simple idea, and it's queen a3. But to hold the draw is still tricky for black. But the idea here is that we attack the rook, and if the rook moves, we can just keep attacking it through a number of different ways. We just keep attacking the rook. So if he goes rook b1, if he goes rook d1, I just keep attacking the rook, and the rook has to move. If he ever tries to get active, then I always have, again, this back rank threat. Right? Same idea. Same idea. And so the rook can't really leave the back rank. And if he tries to well, yeah. So rook f1 is probably the only move that white really has. But then here it is still tricky. I think, wait, sorry. Is that right? No, if he goes, yeah, rook f1 right away. Yeah, it's still tricky here because I think the best move is queen b3. If we play some other move other than queen b3, it's a little bit harder to hold. And I forget why. I think it's because... I forget why. I looked at it earlier and I forget. But yeah, it's still tricky, but that would have been the best way for black to play. But instead I played rook d8. And he played h4. So he did find the best move, which is not hard to find because my threat is very obvious. So he played h4. And I played rook d1. I thought here for like 5 minutes or so. Yeah, I dug in deep, trying to find something. I was really, really trying to find something. I think I looked at e4, but it just doesn't work because it's... and I think I looked at f5. Yeah, I did look at f5. I was hoping for like f5, e4, but this just doesn't work. I think he can just activate his rook or, yeah. So I was looking at something, but I couldn't find anything. So I played rook d1 check. We captured queen e2, queen c6. I played bishop g4. He played b6, queen b2. And at this point, there were actually 3 to 4 people kind of standing, around and watching the game, which was kind of annoying just because I'm losing. It's just not fun to have people watch you when you're completely losing, or even when you're a little bit losing, or just a little bit worse. It's not great. You want people watching you when you're winning, right? So I didn't know who the people were. They were just random players and people, but yeah, it's just not fun. He played b7. I played king h7. I mean, I obviously I was very close to resigning here, but I had to just give it a bit of a shot. If I'm looking at the score sheet, yeah, and my opponent had 6 minutes. I had 8 minutes, so I thought I'd play a few more moves. He played queen e8. Played queen takes f2. He got a second queen, and then bishop f3. I had to try it. Had to give it a shot. My thinking was, if my king somehow, in some miracle, was able to avoid checks, then maybe I can get a draw. Although even then, it's kind of a pipe dream, because probably there's a case where he can just put a queen on h3 or on f1. But I don't know. I was still clinging on to. I was still in denial, maybe. He played queen g8 check, king g6, queen b e8, king f5. All these moves were done very quickly on both sides. We didn't have much time left. King e4, queen 8 c6 check, and then I resigned here. So, yeah, I lost round 4, and it was overall a pretty disappointing game. I'm still inexperienced in this opening, don't really have much experience, and just don't know the ideas very well. And in the game, I played too slowly from moves 9 to 14. Like, for example, on move 9, I had an hour and a half left. And then after move 14, I had 56 minutes. So I spent half an hour, a bit over half an hour on 5 moves. Is that right? Yeah. So, and not just there. And then I just played a little bit too slowly. And also, what else do I have in my notes here? I missed a few tactical opportunities in the mid game, and part of that was just not being super focused. Like, mentally, I was a little bit tired, and also because I had spent time earlier on, I didn't feel I had enough time to dedicate to calculating those tactical opportunities as deeply. But most importantly of all in this game, just not knowing how a queen moves, thinking that my queen was on his rook. That was really the key point in my recollection. Where was it? When I played bishop e6. Yeah, because I mean, I'm up a pawn here, and I had twice as much time as my opponent, and I just thought I had his rook covered. So allowing him to take on b7 was really the key issue. And it was, really heartbreaking just seeing that my queen wasn't on his rook. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. I just thought like my queen was on the rook. Oops, I forgot to reveal my opponent's rating. So you can think of how the game went and give your best guess, but I'll reveal it now. So my opponent's rating was, drum roll please, 1307. So I think he played at about that level. It seems his play seems in accordance to his rating. I just had played a little bit too slow and forgot how our queen moves, thinking it was on his rook. Okay, that's it for me today. Yeah, thanks for watching.